I'm Nathan, and welcome back to Cheating Tales Lab. Here's something I've learned making this channel. The cruelest people in a family are almost never the ones holding the knife. They're the ones holding the microphone. They toast, they joke, they say the devastating thing with a smile, so that if you flinch, you're the one who ruined the party. Today's story is about a man who got mocked at a family reunion for staying home with his kids. His uncle raised a glass and told 60 people that no school would hire him. The yard laughed. His aunt shouted something I still can't repeat without my jaw tightening. And then a 9-year-old girl climbed onto a picnic bench and asked, very politely, if she could say something about her dad. What I want you to notice in this one is not the insult, it's the arithmetic. Because the man they were laughing at used to teach physics, and physics teachers have a particular disease. They write things down. Dates, counts, numbers that seem boring right up until the moment they're the only thing in the room that can't be argued with. There's a bigger lesson buried in here too, about an industry most parents never think twice about, and about how the loudest man in any family is usually the one with the most to hide. Stay with me all the way to the end, because the thing that finally brought the whole house down wasn't the lawyer, and it wasn't the reporter. It was a signature from 1994. Let's get into it. Jude Kincaid's day started at 5:40 in the morning, and it started with a sound only he could hear. It was the click of the coffee maker's timer, 1 second before it actually began to brew, and he had trained himself to wake to it because the machine itself was loud enough to wake Arlo, and Arlo awake at 5:40 was a 5-year-old with opinions about socks. So Jude woke to the click, crossed the kitchen in 4 steps, and caught the switch with his thumb before it engaged. Then he made the coffee by hand, quietly, in a French press he'd bought at a yard sale for $2. This was the kind of thing nobody gave you credit for. He'd stopped expecting them to. By 6:15 he had Thea's lunch packed in a soft cooler with an ice sheet that would still be cold at 2 in the afternoon, because she wouldn't get a real break before then, and she wouldn't eat unless it was already made. 3rd year of nurse anesthesia school. Clinicals at a hospital 51 minutes away, and a program director who talked about a 12-hour day like it was a rumor. Thea Kincaid came down the stairs at 6:20 in scrubs, with her hair still wet, and Jude handed her the cooler and a travel mug and a folded index card. She looked at the card. What's this? Arlo drew you a horse. He says it's a horse. It's a dog. It's a horse, she said, and put it in her chest pocket, and kissed him, and was gone. Then the real shift started. Lottie came down at 6:50 on her own, because Lottie was 9 and had decided at 7 that alarms were for people who couldn't be trusted. She sat at the counter with a spiral notebook and a mechanical pencil and wrote while she ate, which drove her grandmother crazy and delighted her father. What are we doing today? Jude said. Wednesday, said Lottie, as though that answered it. Library at 10, Arlo's speech at 11:15. You said we could get the seeds. We're getting the seeds. I wrote it down, so it's binding, Jude agreed. He'd learned about Lottie's lists the year she turned 8, when he found a page in her notebook titled, Things That Are True, 22 items. Number 9 was, Dad can fix the vacuum. Number 14 was, Mom is tired, but not at us. Number 19 was, Grandpa gets quiet when Uncle Clyde talks. He'd sat down on the edge of her bed with that notebook in his hands and understood, with a kind of vertigo, that his daughter was building a record of the world and that she was going to be extremely difficult to lie to. Arlo came down at 7:05 in one sock, furious about it. The morning went the way mornings went. Jude got a 5-year-old through a speech therapy session, got a 9-year-old to the library, argued with a self-checkout machine, bought 2 packets of pole beans and 1 of radishes, and by 1:30 in the afternoon, he was on his knees in the side yard turning dirt, while Arlo drove a plastic excavator through the compost. At 3, he was at the Little League field on Ridge Road, because he still coached the 8 and under team, unpaid, and because he'd been asked to, and because he didn't know how to say no to a kid with a glove. And at the Little League field on Ridge Road, he did the thing that would eventually end his uncle. He wrote down pitch counts. Not just his own, everybody's. It was a reflex he'd never lost from the years when he'd been paid to do it, and it embarrassed him a little. A grown man in a folding chair with a composition notebook, logging who threw how many to whom, noting the date and the field and the temperature. Left column, pitcher. Middle, count. In fives, with a slash for each inning. Right column, anything worth a note. Kid favoring shoulder. Ump had a cold. Field 2 lights on at 6:40, nobody on it. 3 years of composition notebooks. 11 of them, in a milk crate in the garage, under a bag of birdseed. The last thing he did every day was the thing he'd never tell anyone about, because it sounded insane. He wrote down his own hours, not for anybody, for himself. Because when you stop having a job, you stop having any external proof that you did anything. And there had been a stretch in the first year where he'd lain awake at 2 in the morning, genuinely unable to say what he had accomplished with his life since April. So he'd started logging it like a shift. 5:40 to 8:15, breakfast/lunch school prep. 8:15 to 9 o'clock, laundry, dishwasher, Arlo, and so on to the end of the day, and then a single line at the bottom. Everybody ate. Everybody's okay. He was on notebook 11. Thea came home at 8:40 that night, and they ate leftovers standing up at the counter, and she pressed her forehead against his shoulder for a second and said, 14 months. 14 months, he said. And then you can do whatever you want. Anything. I'll take the mornings for a year. I know. I mean it, Jude. I know. On the refrigerator, held on by a magnet shaped like a corncob, was a cream-colored card with a border of printed daisies. Kincaid Family Reunion, it said, August the 2nd, hosted by Clyde and Beverly. And underneath, in a font pretending to be handwriting, come celebrate how far this family has come. Jude had read it maybe 40 times that summer, every time he opened the refrigerator, which was, he estimated, roughly 900 times. He'd already decided they were going. He had told himself it was for his father. To understand why a family reunion invitation could sit on a refrigerator like an unexploded shell, you have to go back 4 years, to when Jude Kincaid was somebody else. He was Mr. Kincaid then, room 214, Tallow Creek High School, 2nd floor, the corner room with the bad radiator and the good windows. Physics, 2 sections of freshman physical science, and an after-school robotics club that met in an unheated shop bay and had, in 6 years, sent 4 kids to state and 1 to a scholarship at Purdue. He'd been good at it, not beloved teacher movie good. He wasn't charismatic, he was something rarer, which was patient. He had a way of standing next to a kid who was wrong and saying, okay, walk me through it. Until the kid found the mistake himself, and then saying nothing at all, letting the kid have the whole thing. 12 years of that. He was also the assistant baseball coach. Not because he'd played, he'd been a mediocre outfielder at a small school, but because he could keep a book, and he could teach a 14-year-old what a lever was, and pitching is a lever. The head coach was a man named Wilbur Standish, who everybody in 3 counties called Webb, 63 years old, hands like a catcher's mitt, and a philosophy he repeated so often it was practically a school motto. Arms don't grow back. Webb ran hard pitch limits, not the league minimums, his own, stricter, with mandatory rest days he tracked on a laminated card in his back pocket. He'd sit a kid in a sectional final with a lead on the line if the card said sit. He had done it, twice. He'd been hung in effigy on the internet for it, by grown men who had never thrown a baseball in their lives. And then the barn opened. The barn was what everybody called the Kincaid Select Performance Center, 40,000 square feet of former farm equipment warehouse on the east edge of town, retrofitted with turf and netting, and 8 batting tunnels, and a mezzanine, with a scoreboard, and a bar that served nothing stronger than root beer. It belonged to Clyde Kincaid, Jude's uncle, his father's older brother. Clyde had spent 30 years as an insurance adjuster, and had discovered, somewhere around 50, that the actual money in America was not in claims, it was in hope. Specifically, in the hope a parent has at 11 o'clock at night when they are looking at a photograph of their child in a batting stance and thinking, maybe. Kincaid Select was a travel baseball organization, 11 teams, ages 9 through 18, $4,200 a season, uniforms extra, winter tunnel memberships, Private lessons at $80 an hour from coaches Clyde paid $22. And, at the top of the funnel, the thing that had built the barn, the showcase. 3 times a year, Kincaid Select ran a college exposure showcase. $250 per player to attend, and the flyer said, in a red banner across the top, college coaches in attendance, and listed them, 12, 15, 20 programs. Division I, Division II, junior colleges in 3 states. And for $6,500, a family could buy into what Clyde called the placement track, which came with a folder, a highlight reel, a recruiting profile, and quarterly meetings in Clyde's office, under a wall of framed jerseys. Jude had thought all of it was tacky and expensive and basically legal, right up until the last weekend of June, 4 years ago, when he sat in a folding chair at the barn with a composition notebook on his knee and watched a 16-year-old named Keaton Vesey throw 203 pitches in 3 days. Keaton Vesey was the best arm to come out of Tallow Creek in 20 years, and he was also the poorest kid on the roster. His mother, Darcy, cleaned 3 dental offices at night and had signed up for the placement track in March by refinancing the house her father had left her. Keaton had thrown a full 7 innings on Friday for his high school summer team. On Saturday morning, the showcase started, and Clyde's flyer for that weekend had a name on it in bold, a pitching coordinator from a Big Ten program. Keaton threw 81 pitches Saturday. He came off the mound shaking his hand out, and Jude watched him do the thing pitchers do when they don't want to be seen doing it, which is to press the back of the elbow with 2 fingers and look somewhere else. Saturday night, Keaton threw an exhibition inning at the barn because the mezzanine was full and Clyde wanted a show. 22 more. Sunday, the Big Ten man had not come. Nobody said so. There was a man in a polo shirt near the fence with a radar gun, who turned out to be a regional scout for an independent league team in Illinois. Clyde told the parents the coordinator was delayed but watching film, and then he told Keaton he had one more chance to make an impression. And Keaton, 16 years old, with his mother in the 3rd row of the bleachers and a mortgage on the house, threw 100 pitches on Sunday afternoon in 91-degree heat. 203. Jude wrote it down because he wrote everything down. He looked at the number on his own page and felt his stomach drop, because he taught physics, and he knew exactly what a lever does when you keep loading it past its yield point. It doesn't bend gradually. It holds, and then it fails all at once. Keaton Vesey's ulnar collateral ligament failed 11 days later, in a game that didn't matter, on pitch 9. He had the surgery. He had the second surgery. He never threw above 72 miles an hour again, and when Jude last saw him, he couldn't straighten his left arm all the way, which was a strange thing, because it hadn't been his throwing arm that was the problem. It had been everything downstream of it, the way he'd started compensating, the shoulder, the back. Jude did what he thought a person was supposed to do. He wrote a 2-page letter, attached photocopies of his notebook pages, and put it in front of the athletic director. The athletic director was Yvonne Tarleton, 44, a former college volleyball player, sharp as a tack, and the person who had signed the facilities agreement that let Kincaid Select use the high school's fields, cages, weight room, and, critically, the school's name and logo in its marketing, for $1,100 a year. Yvonne read the letter in front of him. She was very calm. She said, "This is a private organization, Jude. Their pitch counts aren't ours to police." He said, "It's our field. It's our name on his jersey, and he's our student." She said, "I'll look into it," and she put the letter in a drawer. 6 weeks later, Jude Kincaid was called into a meeting with Yvonne Tarleton and an HR representative from the district office, and told that a concern regarding professional boundaries had been raised about him. Not an allegation, a concern. There was no complainant he was permitted to know about. There was no incident he was permitted to see described. There was a document, 3/4 of a page, headed Professional Conduct Inquiry, Preliminary, and it said that questions have arisen regarding unsupervised contact with a student outside instructional hours, which described Robotics Club, which met in a shop bay with the door propped open and a sign-in sheet, for 6 years, with the principal's signature on the charter. They offered him a choice. He could request a formal hearing, which would be public, and which would put the words, "Professional conduct," and "unsupervised contact," and his name in the same newspaper his children would someday learn to read. Or he could resign, effective at the end of the semester, and the inquiry would be closed as no finding. Webb Standish went in the next day and put his laminated pitch card on Yvonne Tarleton's desk and told her, at a volume the front office secretary still talks about, exactly what he thought. Webb was told his contract would not be renewed. 31 years. Jude resigned. He was 33 years old, with a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and he believed, genuinely, stupidly believed, that he'd be teaching in a different district by August. He applied to 11 schools in a 90-mile radius over the next 2 years. He got 4 interviews. He got no offers. Twice he was told, off the record, kindly, by people who were trying to help him, that there was something in the file. A closed inquiry with no finding is still an inquiry, and no principal in a county of 40,000 people wants to be the one who hired the guy with a sentence like that in his history. Beverly Kincaid sat on the school board, Clyde's wife. She had voted, with the rest of them, to accept his resignation. She had also, that same year, moved to extend the Kincaid Select Facilities Agreement to a 5-year term and abstained from the vote in a way that made the local paper's Thursday edition and nothing else. So Jude stayed home. Thea, who had been a med-surg nurse for 9 years and had wanted this since she was 22, took the Crina seat she'd been offered and deferred twice, and Jude took the kids. And for a while, in the parts of himself he only visited at 2 in the morning, he thought of it as a holding pattern. Somewhere in year 2 he stopped thinking of it that way. Somewhere in year 2 he got good at it. He learned that a 5-year-old will do almost anything if you let him hold the tape measure. He learned to make 4 dinners on a Sunday. He learned the bus driver's name and the crossing guard's name and which librarian would let Lottie take out books above her level. He built a raised bed. He rewired a lamp. He taught his son to swim. And every time he saw his father, Dave Kincaid, 68 years old, 31 years a rigger at the grain terminal on the river, Dave would look at the ground and say some version of, "Let it go, son. Clyde's Clyde. It's not worth the family." Jude never understood why his father, who had once climbed 40 feet in an ice storm to free a jammed cable, could not look his own brother in the eye. He would understand, eventually. It would take 3 years and a 9-year-old on a picnic bench. The 2nd of August was 94 degrees with a sky like a wet sheet. Clyde and Beverly's place sat on 11 acres out past the water tower. A big cream-colored house with a portico they'd added in 2019, and a lawn so aggressively green it looked printed. There were 4 folding tables under a rented white canopy, a caterer's chafing dishes with sterno, a cooler the size of a coffin, and 60-some Kincaids and Kincaid adjacents in lawn chairs arranged in a rough horseshoe facing the canopy, because Clyde liked a room with a front. Jude got there at 1. He carried a 9x13 pan of his mother's recipe for scalloped corn, which he had made himself at 6 that morning, and Arlo carried a bag of paper plates with tremendous seriousness, and Lottie carried her notebook, because Lottie carried her notebook. Thea couldn't come. She was on a cardiac rotation and had traded away every Saturday through October. The afternoon was fine for 2 hours. That's the part people forget about days like this. It was fine. Jude played horseshoes with 2 second cousins. He fixed the latch on the gate to the pool because it was hanging by 1 screw and there were toddlers. He got Arlo 3 helpings of macaroni and 1 of watermelon and sat with his mother, Marcy, in the shade of the garage while she told him about her hip. His sister Bonnie found him around 3. Bonnie Ott, 34, who cut hair 4 days a week in a 2-chair shop on Main and therefore knew more about Tallow Creek than the mayor and the sheriff combined. She sat down on the cooler beside him with a plastic cup of lemonade and said, without preamble, "Clyde's doing a toast. He always does a toast. He's got it written down, Jude." Jude looked at her. "On a card," Bonnie said. "I saw it in his shirt pocket." At 4:15, Clyde Kincaid stood up on the low deck at the front of the canopy and clinked a bottle opener against a mason jar until the horseshoe of lawn chairs went quiet. He was 61 and looked 55, and he had the specific physical confidence of a man who has spent 2 decades being the biggest thing in every room he enters by choosing small rooms. He had a golf tan. He had a linen shirt. He had, in his shirt pocket, an index card. All right, he said. Y'all sit down. Bev, sit down. I want to say something. Marcy Kincaid, 66, folded her hands in her lap. Dave Kincaid, standing at the back near the coolers, put his hands in his pockets and looked at the grass. 14 years we've done this, Clyde said. 14 years. And I want to say, look around. Look at this. My daddy dug ditches. My daddy dug ditches for the county, and he'd have never believed this lawn. Some laughter, some applause. So I want to toast this family, he said, and he raised his mason jar. To Dwayne, who's got the second dealership going up in Kokomo. Dwayne, stand up, that's real. To Trey, my boy, who's got 200,000 people following that barn account. Whatever that means. I don't understand it. I just cash it. Laughter. Trey Kincaid, 27, raised a hand from the second table without lifting his head. To Bev, who's about to be board president. God help the district. Applause. To Bonnie, doing hair, keeping this town beautiful, sweetheart. To everybody's success, Clyde said, and he looked out over the horseshoe, and then he looked directly at Jude Kincaid, who was sitting in a lawn chair with a 5-year-old asleep against his ribs and a paper plate balanced on his knee. Everybody's, Clyde said, except Dave's boy over there, who babysits his own kids all day because no school in the state of Indiana would hire him. There is a specific quality to 60 people laughing at once outdoors. It doesn't echo. It just goes up and out and is gone, and it takes about 4 seconds. And inside those 4 seconds you can hear individual voices you will remember for the rest of your life. Jude heard his cousin Dwayne's bark. He heard a woman he'd known since he was 6 say, "Oh, Clyde." In the delighted tone of someone at a comedy show, he heard, somewhere to the left, a teenager say, "Damn." The way you do at a dunk. He heard his father say nothing. Jude did not move. He had spent 4 years learning not to move. Arlo was asleep against him, and the plate was on his knee, and he sat absolutely still, with his face arranged in something like mild amusement, because the only thing worse than being the joke is being the joke who can't take it. And then, from the second table, over the tail end of the laughter, Beverly Kincaid cupped her hand beside her mouth and shouted, in a voice pitched to carry across a gymnasium, "Stay-at-home failure." That one didn't get 4 seconds. That one got a whoop and a scatter of applause and one long "Oh" from the cousins, and somebody actually stamped a foot. Jude reached down and set his plate on the grass, and he realized, deciding something. Not what to say. He knew he wasn't going to say anything. He was deciding whether to pick up his son and walk to the car in front of 60 people, which would end the day and end the summer and end 14 years of reunions, or whether to sit there and let it wash over him for the 9th time in 4 years. He was still deciding when the picnic bench at table 2 scraped backward on the flagstone. Lottie Kincaid, 9 years old, in a yellow sundress with a grass stain on the hem, climbed up onto the bench, and then, because the bench wasn't high enough for anyone to see her, up onto the table itself, and stood among the pans of scalloped corn with her spiral notebook held against her chest in both arms. "Excuse me," she said. Nobody heard her. "Excuse me," said Lottie Kincaid. The canopy went quiet, the way a room goes quiet when a glass breaks in the kitchen. She looked at Clyde, not at her father. At Clyde, on the deck, with his mason jar still half raised. "Can I say something about my dad?" she said. Clyde Kincaid did the only thing a man like Clyde Kincaid can do with 60 people watching. He laughed and spread his arms and said, "Well, hell. Floor's yours, sweetheart." Lottie opened her notebook. "This is my dad's day," she said. "I wrote it down because he doesn't." And she read it. Flat, careful, the way a 9-year-old reads a list. 5:40, he gets up before the coffee so it doesn't wake Arlo. 6:15, he makes mom's lunch with the cold sheet so it's still cold at 2. 6:50, he does my hair, and he's not good at it, but he does it. 7, he does Arlo's socks, which takes a long time. Then school. Then he goes to Arlo's speech and sits in the little chair. Then he does the laundry, and the dishwasher, and the garden, and the dinners on Sunday for all week. Then he coaches the little kids for free. Then he does homework with me, and he doesn't just tell me the answer, even when I really want him to. Then he reads 2 chapters. Then he checks the doors. Then he writes down the day in his own notebook, and at the bottom he writes the same thing every night. She looked up. It says everybody ate, everybody's okay. Not a sound under that canopy. Somewhere out past the pool a dove was going. And also, Lottie said, and turned the page, Dad didn't get fired. I know, because I heard Grandpa say it. Dad said no to something, and then they said he couldn't teach anymore. Grandpa said, he did the right thing, and it cost him everything. And Grandma said, hush. Dave Kincaid, at the back by the coolers, took his hands out of his pockets. So he's not a failure, Lottie said to Beverly, politely, the way you'd correct someone about the time. That's just not true. And she should have stopped there. She was 9. She had one more thing on her list, and she'd been carrying it around since June, the way a kid carries a rock they think is a fossil. And she said it because it was in the notebook, and everything in the notebook was true. Also, Uncle Clyde, Lottie said, how come you and Miss Yvonne hold hands at the batting cages on Tuesdays when the barn is closed? Later, Jude would try to describe the next 3 seconds to Thea and give up. He said it was like watching a photograph develop. 60 faces all moving at once from one expression to a different one. 2 of Dwayne's kids started to laugh and stopped because nobody else did. Trey Kincaid put both hands flat on the table. Beverly Kincaid's face went the color of the tablecloth, and then, terribly, she looked at Clyde before she looked at Lottie, which everyone under that canopy saw, and which told everyone under that canopy that Beverly Kincaid already knew. Clyde said, that's okay. Okay, that's enough now. I'm just asking, Lottie said. That's enough, Clyde said, and it came out of him at a volume nobody had heard from him before, the real voice under the golf tan, and it cracked across that lawn and made a toddler cry, and it was, in the end, the single most useful thing Clyde Kincaid ever did for his nephew, because now 60 people had seen the joke, and the shout, and the flinch, in that order. Jude Kincaid stood up with his sleeping son on his shoulder. He walked to the table, and he lifted his daughter down off it with one arm, and he set her on her feet, and he crouched to her eye level in front of everybody and said, quietly enough that only she and the first 2 rows heard it, thank you. That was very brave and very true, and it was not your fault. Then he stood, and he looked at his uncle for exactly as long as it takes to memorize a face. Great party, Clyde, he said, and he walked to the car. Lottie cried in the back seat, which she almost never did. Did I do something bad? No. Everybody got quiet. Yes. Was it the Yvonne part? Jude drove for a while. The corn was head high on both sides of the road, and the sky was going orange over it, and he could feel his own pulse in his hands on the wheel, and he thought about how many things he was about to have to be careful with. It was the Yvonne part, he said, and that wasn't a bad thing you did. But grown-ups can be very ugly about the truth, and some of them are going to be ugly about it now, and that's going to be about them, not you. So here's the deal. From tonight, you don't say anything else about it to anyone, not because it's a secret, because it's mine to carry now, and you're 9, and carrying it is my job. Okay, and Lottie. What? Where'd you see them? The family group text started at 7:02 that night and ran to 240 messages by Sunday. Beverly's contribution, at 9:14 p.m., was a paragraph that began, "We are all still processing what happened today," and contained the words, "Deeply inappropriate for a child. The unfounded accusation. Yawn and I hope Jude will consider what kind of household produces that." It did not contain an apology. It did not contain a denial. Dwayne's contribution was 3 laughing emojis, deleted 11 minutes later. Marcy Kincaid called at 10 and cried, and said she didn't know what to do, and Jude said, "You don't have to do anything, Mom," and she said, "I should have said something at the table," and he said, "Yes," because he was done lying to be comfortable. On Wednesday, a letter came from a law firm in Indianapolis, 2 pages. It informed Jude Kincaid that false and defamatory statements regarding Mr. Clyde Kincaid's personal life had been made in the presence of numerous witnesses, demanded a written retraction and apology within 14 days, and noted, this was the part Jude read 4 times, that we are additionally aware of an unresolved professional conduct matter in your employment history, which we would be obligated to raise should this proceed. Jude sat at the kitchen table with that letter for a long time. Then he got up, went to the garage, moved a bag of birdseed, and pulled the milk crate out from under the workbench. 11 composition notebooks. Here is the thing about Jude Kincaid that his uncle did not know, because his uncle had never once asked him a question about himself. Jude did not think about conflict the way Clyde did. Clyde thought about volume. Clyde's entire method was to be the loudest, confident thing in a small room. Jude thought about levers. It was literally what he had taught, 4 days a week, for 12 years, to 15-year-olds who wanted to know why physics mattered. You have a load you cannot move. You do not get stronger. You do not push harder. You go find the fulcrum, and you move it 3 feet, and then a boy who weighs 110 pounds lifts a car. He wrote it on the back of the law firm's letter, in pencil, because that's where he had paper. Don't push harder. Move the fulcrum. Then he wrote, underneath it, 3 things. 1. What is the actual load? Not Clyde, the money. 2. Who is holding it up? Not Clyde, Yvonne, the district, the bank. 3. Who wants it down as badly as I do, and doesn't know it yet? He did not answer the law firm. He did not post anything. He did not call his uncle. He did not tell his mother. He told Thea, at 11:40 at night, standing in the kitchen, and Thea Kincaid, who had spent 9 years holding people's hands while they were told the worst thing they would ever hear, and who was very hard to frighten, listened to all of it, and then said one sentence. 14 months of me being useless, and then I'm all yours. Don't do anything stupid before then. I'm not going to do anything stupid. I know, that's what worries me. You're going to do something extremely smart, and those take longer. The next 11 weeks were the least dramatic 11 weeks of the entire affair, and they were the ones that won it. Jude got the kids to school. He coached fall ball. He made the Sunday dinners. And between 9 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, at a card table in the corner of the garage with a space heater and a laptop that was 6 years old, he did what he used to do for a living, which was take a messy real-world system and reduce it to a table of numbers that could not be argued with. He started with the flyers. Kincaid Select had run 22 college exposure showcases over 7 years, and every single one of them had been advertised on the internet, and the internet does not forget a flyer. He found 19 of them cached, archived, or still live on the barn's own site. 2 more were in a Facebook group for county baseball parents. The last one Darcy Vesey had, in a folder, in a fireproof box. Every flyer named college coaches. He built a spreadsheet, date, event, every named program, every named coach. Then he did the boring part. College baseball programs publish their schedules. They published them years back. He went school by school, coach by coach, date by date, and asked one question. Where was this man, actually, on this weekend? On 19 of the 22 showcase dates, at least one named coach had been at his own team's game, at his own school, in another state. On 6 dates, the named coach had been in a different time zone. On one glorious date, a fall elite showcase in October, a listed pitching coach had, according to his own university's press release, been in Tokyo on a coaching exchange. Jude found 4 coaches' email addresses and wrote them a plain, short, extremely polite note asking whether they had ever attended or endorsed a Kincaid Select showcase. 3 answered. All 3 said no. 1 asked to be sent the flyer, and then sent a second email, 90 minutes later, containing the phrase, "I've never heard of this organization and my name and university logo are on this document." That was the first crack. The second one was worse. He drove out to Darcy Vesey's on a Thursday and sat in a kitchen with a water stain on the ceiling and looked at the placement track folder. It was a beautiful folder, embossed. Inside, a recruiting profile, a DVD nobody could play anymore, a verified interest summary, and 4 letters. The letters were on university letterhead. They were addressed to Keaton. They expressed interest, praised his frame and arm speed, and invited him to stay in contact as we build our class. 3 of the 4 had the same M-spacing quirk in the second paragraph. 2 had a phone number in the footer with the wrong area code for the campus. And all 4 were signed with a scan of a signature that appeared, at 400% zoom, in the exact same pixel dimensions on each page. Darcy said he read those every night for a year. She said it very evenly. He kept them under his mattress, like a kid keeps a girl's picture. Then she showed him the other paperwork. It was called an Athlete Future Agreement, 9 pages. It had been signed at the barn, in Clyde's office, at a small table under the framed jerseys, with a notary who worked at the barn's front desk on weekends. It advanced Darcy Vesey $18,000 against anticipated athletic scholarship and future earnings, at an effective rate she had never been told, secured, and this was the sentence Jude read out loud twice, because he couldn't believe a person had written it down. Secured by a second lien on the house at 411 Weatherby Street. At the bottom of page 9, in the block reserved for institutional endorsement, was a line that said District Athletic Liaison, and on that line was a signature. Y. Tarleton. And the lender, printed across the top of every page, was the Tallow Creek Federal Credit Union. Jude sat in that kitchen and felt the fulcrum move under his hand. Because the credit union had 1 branch and 1 branch manager, and the branch manager had been the president of the Tallow Creek Threshers Booster Club for 9 years. His name was Bart Tarleton. He was Yvonne Tarleton's husband. Clyde Kincaid's answer to 11 quiet weeks arrived on a Tuesday morning in the form of a woman with a lanyard and a clipboard, standing on Jude's porch, apologizing before she'd finished introducing herself. An anonymous report had been made to the County Child Services hotline. The concerns listed were an adult male alone in the home with minor children during school hours, a history of a professional conduct inquiry, and a 9-year-old who had made sexualized statements about adults at a family gathering. Jude stood in his own doorway and felt something in his chest go very cold and very flat, and he recognized the feeling, because it was the same one he'd had in the meeting with the HR representative 4 years earlier. The feeling of a man watching a lever be applied to him. Then he did the thing he had been rehearsing, without knowing it, for 4 years. He said, "Come in. Take your shoes off or don't. I don't care. Kitchen's through there. Can I get you water or coffee? I have both." The caseworker was in the house for 2 hours and 40 minutes. She saw a chore chart, a garden, a bedroom for each child, a locked cabinet with cleaning supplies, a first aid kit, a fire extinguisher on a bracket by the stove, and 11 composition notebooks on a kitchen table logging 3 years of a man's days in 5-minute increments. She interviewed Lottie alone in the living room for 20 minutes, and when she came out, her jaw was set differently. She talked to Thea by phone. She talked to Arlo's speech therapist. She talked to the school. And at the door, closing her folder, she said something she was almost certainly not supposed to say. "Mr. Kincaid, I've done this 11 years. I want you to write down the date and time I got here, and the date and time I left, and I want you to keep it. It's already in the notebook," Jude said. The report was closed as unsubstantiated in 9 days. And Jude Kincaid, who had spent 11 weeks building a case about baseball, now had something better. A documentary proof that within 72 hours of a 9-year-old asking a question in a yard, someone had tried to take his children. Retaliation is a much easier thing to prove than fraud. And it is very much easier to make people angry about. He took everything to a lawyer in Lafayette named Luz Arroyo, 51, who did unfair trade practice work and had a reputation for being pleasant right up until the moment she wasn't. She spent 40 minutes with the spreadsheet, 10 with the 4 letters, and then went silent for a long time over the Athlete Future Agreement. "Do you understand what you have here?" she said. "I have some numbers. You have a consumer fraud case that a state attorney general will take out of your hands and run with, because it involves children and student athletes and second liens on working people's houses, and there is nothing in this world an elected attorney general likes more than that." She tapped the last page. "And you have a public official's signature on a private lending instrument. Mr. Kincaid, that's not a family fight. That's a career-ending, license-revoking, potentially federal problem, and the only reason it has survived 7 years is that nobody who could see all the pieces was in the same room. Until now. Until a 9-year-old, said Luz Arroyo. God bless her. She filed with the Consumer Protection Division. Within 3 weeks, the file landed on the desk of an investigator named Malachi Drew, 45, who had spent his career on roofing scams and elder fraud, and who, it turned out, had a 14-year-old son who played travel ball, and who read the 22-date attendance table twice, and then called Luz Arroyo at 7:40 in the morning. Trey Kincaid came to Jude, which nobody expected. He showed up at the Little League field on a Saturday in November, with the collar of his jacket up, 27 years old, and stood at the fence for a whole half inning before he said anything. You went to see Darcy Vesey. I did. She show you the letters. She did. Trey looked out at the field. I made those, he said. I made all of them. He'd tell me a school, and I'd find the letterhead online, and it's not hard. It's 40 minutes in a design program. First one, I thought it was like a mock-up, like a sample of what a real one would look like, for the folder, so the kid could see. That's what he told me. Then there were 60. How many families? Since we started the placement track? 110, maybe 120. Trey's voice did something and he stopped it. There's a kid in Winnemac who put one of my letters on his graduation cap. Jude did not say anything for a while. That old teacher instinct, let him get there himself. He calls me the marketing department, Trey said finally. I'm 27, and I have $180,000 in a business account, and I can't sleep. What do I do? You want the real answer or the comfortable one? Real. Get your own lawyer. Not his. Print everything before you tell him anything. And then tell the truth to the state, all of it, including your part, first, because the first one through the door gets to be a witness, and everybody after him gets to be a defendant. Trey nodded slowly. Then he said, You know he's going to burn down every bridge in this family to get at you. I know. Why aren't you scared? Jude watched a 9-year-old on the mound overthrow a fastball by 4 feet. Because he can only do one thing, Jude said. He can be loud. That's it. That's the whole toolbox. And you can't be loud at a document. The hardest thing Jude Kincaid did in the entire 9 months was drive to a house on Sycamore Court on a Thursday evening in December and knock on Bart Tarleton's door. Bart answered in a cardigan with a dish towel over his shoulder. 49 years old, soft-spoken, the kind of man who ran the concession stand himself on Friday nights because nobody else would. He'd known Jude for 15 years. He'd bought a raffle ticket from Lottie in the spring. Jude, he said, and then, seeing his face, oh hell. They sat in the garage because Bart's daughters were doing homework inside. Jude did not lead with the affair. He'd thought hard about that. He led with the loans. He put down 4 athlete future agreements, Vesey, Neighbors, and 2 more Luz had collected. And he said, Bart, I need you to look at page 9 of each of these and tell me if your credit union authorized a district official to co-sign an endorsement line on a consumer loan secured by a member's home. Bart Tarleton read page 9 of the first one. Then he read page 9 of the second one. He sat with the 4th one in his hands for maybe 90 seconds, and Jude watched a man's whole life reorganize itself in real time, because Bart Tarleton was not a corrupt man. He was a careful man, and a careful man knows immediately and exactly how much trouble a signature like that is. This isn't a product we underwrite, Bart said. These were booked as home equity, 61 of them. Clyde brought them in as a portfolio referral. He said the district had a wellness partnership. He looked up. Why is my wife's name on this line? And Jude Kincaid, who could have made that moment satisfying, did not. I think you should ask her that before you ask me, he said. And I think you should ask her about Tuesday nights at the barn. Bart Tarleton sat very still in a folding chair in his own garage with a dish towel still over his shoulder. How long? He said. I don't know. My daughter saw them in June. She's 9. She wasn't spying, Bart. She thought it was strange and she wrote it down, because that's what she does. Batting cages, Bart said, to nobody. Tuesdays, when it's closed. Bart Tarleton laughed once, an awful sound. She takes a spin class Tuesdays, he said. 9 years. I make her a plate." They sat in the cold. Then Bart stood up and squared the 4 contracts into a neat stack on his workbench, and squared them again, and his hands were shaking, and his voice was not. "Show me the rest of the loan files," he said. After that, Jude Kincaid mostly stopped being the one doing things. That is what happens when you move a fulcrum correctly. You stop pushing, and the machine pushes. In January, the Consumer Protection Division served a civil investigative demand on Kincaid Select Baseball LLC, Kincaid Select Performance Center LLC, and Clyde Kincaid personally. 7 years of showcase advertising, every placement track file, every athlete future agreement, and all communications with the Tallow Creek Community School Corporation. In January, Bart Tarleton took a stack of 61 loan files to his own board, recused himself in writing, and self-reported to the credit union's federal regulator, which is a thing almost nobody ever does, and which meant that by February, there were 2 auditors in a conference room in Tallow Creek who did not care about anybody's last name. In February, Trey Kincaid walked into a state office in Indianapolis with his own attorney and 31 gigabytes of files and talked for 6 hours. In February, Luz Arroyo filed a petition with the Indiana State Board of Education to vacate the professional conduct inquiry, preliminary, in the personnel file of Jude Kincaid, attaching the robotics club charter, 6 years of sign-in sheets, the principal's signature, and a timeline showing the inquiry had been opened 41 days after Jude submitted a written safety complaint about a private organization whose facilities agreement the athletic director had signed. She also attached the County Child Services report, closed unsubstantiated, dated 9 days after a 9-year-old asked a question in a yard. In March, a reporter named Avery Moss published 4,000 words with a table in the middle of it. The table had 3 columns: showcase date, coach advertised as attending, where that coach actually was. It is very hard to shout at a table. In March, Uncle Dwayne Kincaid, who had 2 car dealerships and a personal guarantee on the barn's mezzanine build-out, called the state on his own brother. And in March, Clyde Kincaid drove out to his younger brother's house on a Sunday afternoon and offered Dave Kincaid $40,000. Jude found out because his father came over that night and sat down at the kitchen table and asked for a beer, which he had not done in 12 years, since the heart thing. "He wants me to sign a statement," Dave said, "saying you've got a grudge, saying you've been after him since you lost your job, saying you put your girl up to it." Jude waited. He said 40,000. Dave Kincaid turned the bottle a quarter turn on the table. And then he said, real quiet, he said, "And Davey, we don't ever have to talk about Odom again." "Who's Odom?" And Dave Kincaid, 68 years old, 31 years a rigger, told his son a thing he had never told anyone but a priest. 1994, the grain terminal on the river. Dave was 27, 4 months into being the shift rigger, with a wife and a 2-year-old, Jude, in a car seat in the parking lot at shift change. There was a spreader bar with a cracked weld. The inspection tags were 3 months out. Everybody knew. Nobody stopped the job, because stopping the job meant the barge sat, and the barge sitting meant somebody got walked out, and everybody had a 2-year-old in a car seat somewhere. The bar let go on a Thursday morning. A 22-year-old groundman named Royal Odom was underneath it. He lived. He lost the left leg below the knee. The terminal's insurance carrier sent an adjuster. The adjuster was 29 years old and ambitious, and he was also the shift rigger's older brother, and he sat Dave down in a pickup truck in the gravel lot and explained, patiently, kindly, like family, that if the inspection log showed the bar had been checked that morning, this was an accident, and the terminal survived, and Dave kept his job, and the Odom boy got his settlement either way. And if the log showed what it actually showed, then this was negligence, and the terminal's coverage got contested, and the Odom boy got nothing for 3 years, and Dave Kincaid got charged. Dave signed the log. Royal Odom got $61,000 in 1995 and a prosthetic that never fit right, and Clyde Kincaid got a commendation from the carrier and a career, and Dave Kincaid got 31 more years at the terminal and a brother who owned him. "Every time," Dave said, "every single time I was going to open my mouth, your job, that party, he'd just say the name. He never even had to finish the sentence. He was crying. which Jude had seen twice, both at funerals. "I sat there in that yard," Dave said, "and I let him say that about my son." Jude got up and went around the table and put his hand on the back of his father's neck, the way you do with a kid, and stood there while the old man came apart. Then he said, "Dad, is Royal Odom alive?" Kincaid Select's signing night was the third Friday in April, and it was the biggest night of Clyde Kincaid's year. 340 seats at $40 a head in the barn, a stage at the north end under the mezzanine, a 20-foot screen, dry ice, and 11 high school seniors in folding chairs waiting to sit at a table with a hat and sign a piece of paper in front of their mothers. Clyde had refused to cancel it. Luz Arroyo told Jude that was the single luckiest thing that happened to them all year, because a man under a civil investigative demand who holds his gala anyway is a man who still believes the room is his. Jude bought 2 tickets, like anybody. He wore a gray sport coat that was 6 years old. He sat at table 19, dead center, 11 rows back, with his father beside him in a shirt Marcy had ironed. At 7:12, Clyde Kincaid took the stage to applause, in linen, tanned, magnificent. At 7:19, Malachi Drew and 2 auditors from the Consumer Protection Division came in through the main doors with a records custodian and did not interrupt anything at all. They stood at the back with their hands folded. Nobody who didn't know what they were looking at knew what they were looking at. Everybody who did know went very quiet, and quiet spreads. At 7:26, 300 phones buzzed at once, because Avery Moss's second story, the one with the 4 forged letters at 400% zoom, side by side, with the identical signature pixels circled in red, had gone live at 7:25. At 7:31, Bart Tarleton walked up the side stairs in his cardigan, took the microphone out of the stand while Clyde was still holding a hat, and said, "I'm sorry, folks. I'm Bart. Some of you know me from the concession stand. I'm the branch manager at the credit union, and I need to tell 61 families in this room something tonight, and I'd rather you heard it from me standing up than from a letter." He told them the athlete future agreements had been frozen. He told them the credit union had self-reported to its federal regulator and had voluntarily suspended collection and initiated a full file review. He told them no member's home would be foreclosed on while that review was pending. He said, "If your paperwork has an endorsement line on page 9, please see me at the back before you leave." And then Bart Tarleton, 49 years old, said the only unprofessional thing he said all night. "The signature on that line belongs to my wife," he said. "I did not know. I know now." Yvonne Tarleton left through the loading door on the east wall. Roughly 200 people watched her do it. Clyde got the microphone back. Of course he did. He was Clyde. He said the words. Disgruntled. The end. Nephew. Yand. Out of context. To and. Lawsuit. And he was actually pulling it back. You could feel him pulling it back, because half that room had been buying his hope for 7 years and desperately wanted to keep believing it. And he pointed at table 19 and said, "That man right there has been trying to burn this down for 4 years because he couldn't keep a teaching job." And Jude Kincaid did not stand up. Darcy Vesey stood up. She walked her son to the stage. Keaton Vesey was 20 years old now, 6'3", and he came up the steps with the particular careful gait of somebody whose body has been rebuilt twice, and he could not fully extend his left arm, and everyone in that building had watched him pitch when he was 15. He did not accuse anybody of anything. He had a photocopy of a composition notebook page, and he read it out loud. June 21st. Vesey, 81. He turned the page. June 21st. Evening exhibition. Vesey, 22. He turned the page. June 22nd. Vesey, 100. He looked up. That's 203 pitches in 3 days. I was 16. My mom put our house up for $6,500 so a coach from a Big Ten school could watch me, and he was never coming, and I knew my elbow was already gone, and I threw anyway, because Mr. Kincaid, he pointed at the stage, told me it was my last chance to be somebody. He put the page on the podium. "I'd like my letters to be real," Keaton Vesey said. "That's all I ever wanted." Nobody clapped. 300 people sat in a warehouse and did the arithmetic themselves, which is the only kind of arithmetic that ever changes anybody's mind. And then, in the silence, Dave Kincaid stood up at table 19. He was not a public speaker. He got about 4 words out and had to start again. "My name is Dave Kincaid," he said. "Clyde's my brother. In 1994, I signed a rigging inspection log that was a lie, because Clyde told me to, and a 22-year-old boy lost his leg under a spreader bar at the river terminal. My brother has held that over my head for 31 years. It's why I didn't say a word last August when he called my son a failure in my own family's yard." He turned around, toward the back of the room. "Royal," he said, "I'm sorry. I've been sorry for 31 years and I never once said it to your face." At the very back of the barn, next to a folding table of unclaimed name tags, a 52-year-old man in a Carhartt jacket stood up on one good leg and one carbon fiber one, and he did not say anything either. Clyde Kincaid stood on the stage under the 20-foot screen with a baseball cap in his hand, and for the first time in his adult life, he had nothing to be loud about. The state filed in July 14 counts against Clyde Kincaid: deceptive consumer sales practices, forgery, and, because the forged letters and the loan documents had crossed state lines through email and wire, 4 federal counts that arrived separately in October and were the ones that actually took the house on the 11 acres. He pleaded in the spring. He is 51 months into a 62-month sentence at a federal facility in Illinois, and he has, by all accounts, become extremely popular there, because he is very good in a small room. Yvonne Tarleton surrendered her administrator's license rather than face the hearing, which meant the hearing happened anyway, in writing, and the State Board of Education's findings included a sentence Jude Kincaid printed out and did not frame but did keep in a drawer. The board finds the 2021 conduct inquiry regarding Mr. Kincaid was initiated without complainant, without particularized allegation, and in temporal proximity to a protected safety disclosure. The inquiry is vacated and expunged. She was convicted of official misconduct. She was divorced in 14 months, and the settlement left her with her half of 61 endorsement signatures. Beverly Kincaid was recalled from the school board by a margin of 1,100 votes in a district where nobody votes, and was referred for records tampering and pleaded to a misdemeanor and moved to Florida. Dwayne Kincaid cooperated, kept one dealership, lost the other. Trey Kincaid pleaded to a single count, got 3 years probation and 400 hours, and serves every one of those hours in the same building he used to run the Instagram for. Because in November, the credit union took the barn on the lien and then did something no bank has ever done, which is sell it for $1. It is now the 203 Foundation. Darcy Vesey is the executive director. Webb Standish, 70 now, is the director of pitching, which mostly means he stands in a tunnel and takes cell phones away from 13-year-olds. There is no showcase fee. There is no placement track. There is no membership. Above the door to the tunnels there is a laminated card, enormous, 4 feet across, a blown-up photograph of a page from a composition notebook with a pitcher's name blacked out, and a number circled in red, and under it, in Webb Standish's handwriting, "Arms don't grow back." Royal Odom drives a van for them 2 days a week. The district offered Jude Kincaid his job back in June, room 214. Same corner room, bad radiator, good windows, plus a stipend to restart robotics. He said no. He said no because Thea Kincaid passed her boards in July and started at a surgical center 40 minutes away, and because Arlo was starting kindergarten and had a lot of opinions about socks, and because Lottie was 11 and had entered the years when a kid decides who is safe to tell things to, and Jude had decided, after a great deal of thought, that he was not going to be somewhere else for that. He took a different job instead, 2 days a week, from a card table in the corner of the garage, now with better lighting. The state created an advisory position when it wrote the new statute, a technical consultant on youth athletics disclosure, which means that when a private organization in Indiana wants to put a college coach's name on a flyer or advance money to a family against a 16-year-old's future, there is now a form, and a man reads it. The Kincaid family reunion the following August was held at Bonnie's, in a much smaller yard, with folding chairs and no canopy and no deck at the front. There were 19 people. Dave Kincaid stood up at some point holding a can of pop and got about 4 words out and had to start again, and then said, "To the ones who do the work that nobody claps for." Everybody drank to it, and Lottie Kincaid, who was 11 and had a new notebook, leaned over to her father and whispered, "Can I say something about my dad?" Jude Kincaid looked at his daughter for a second. "Kiddo," he said, "you already did." So that's the story, and I want to be careful about the lesson here, because there's an easy one and a true one. The easy one is, stand up for yourself. Fine, sure, but that's not what Jude Kincaid did, is it? He sat in a lawn chair with a sleeping 5-year-old on his shoulder and took it. For 4 years he took it, and I think a lot of us have been taught that swallowing it makes you a coward, and I want to push back on that, hard, because there's a difference between being silent and being quiet. Silent is when you have nothing. Quiet is when you have something and you're choosing the moment. Here's what actually beat Clyde Kincaid: a boring notebook. A man wrote down pitch counts in a folding chair for 3 years, not because he was building a case, but because that was just who he was, and nobody in his family thought it was worth anything, including him. The insult was that he was a man with no job who wrote down small things. The insult was also the weapon. That happens more than you'd think. The second thing, and this one I really want you to sit with, Clyde didn't fall because Jude got angry at him. Clyde fell because Jude went and found the one man in that town who had every reason to want the truth, and no idea it existed. He drove to Bart Tarleton's house, and he did not enjoy it. He didn't lead with the affair to hurt him. He led with page 9. That's not softness. That's aim. And the third thing, a 9-year-old on a picnic table said one true sentence, and everything that mattered came out of that 4-second silence. Kids notice. Kids write it down. Whatever you're being careful about in front of them, they've already got it in the notebook. Be the kind of person your kids can quote out loud. I'm Nathan. If this one got you, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story.